She walked into the office before sunrise because quiet was the only time she could think. By 8, the noise returned, voices layered over hers, ideas lifted from her mouth and credited to someone else. The pressure felt routine now. It should not have been. Every day carried the same edge. A raised hand ignored, a sentence cut short, a project assigned without her name. None of it came with open hostility. That was why it spread. It was easy to explain away a single moment. Harder when the moments stacked into a pattern and the pattern shaped a culture. Across the building, other women carried the same weight. They moved through meetings with caution. They tracked every interruption and every dismissal. Quiet became a shield and a cage. The company saw productivity. They did not see erosion. The real question hung under every hour. How long can a worker stay present when the room refuses to see her? Chapter 1. The meeting no one heard. The meeting opened with a rush of voices. Chairs scraped, laptops clicked awake. The room held 12 staff. 3 of them were women who had prepared for days. Their notes sat in clean stacks. Their ideas were clear. None of it mattered once the discussion started. A senior associate filled the air before anyone else drew breath. He spoke over the agenda. He spoke over the quiet. When one analyst tried to enter the conversation, her voice slipped under his. Another attempt met the same wall. Her colleague offered support with a short line. That line disappeared under a louder comment from the opposite end of the table. The interruption looked casual. It had a long history inside that office. The analyst waited for the right moment. She pushed again. This time, she laid out a cost-saving strategy with 3 clear steps. The room paused for a second. No one acknowledged her. The conversation moved on as if she never spoke. 8 minutes later, a male coworker repeated the same strategy, almost word for word. Heads lifted. Someone said it was a sharp insight. The analyst wrote nothing. She only tightened her grip on the pen. Across the table, another woman tracked the pattern. She had seen it during her first month. She logged incidents on a private document. She wrote down dates, times, and who spoke over whom. She once considered bringing it to HR. She hesitated because the process rarely reached action. She knew of at least 4 complaints that had gone silent after the first review. She watched the meeting unfold with the same tension she felt every week. The third woman sat closest to the screen. Her presentation was scheduled for the final quarter hour. She rehearsed the opening the night before. She trimmed it to stay under time. When she started, the first interruption hit before her second sentence. A question she planned to answer later cut into her flow. She adjusted. A minute passed. Another interruption hit from a different direction. She tried to regain hold. The meeting clock kept moving. Her section ended with half her material untouched. Once the group left, the conference room stayed still for a long stretch. The analyst who lost credit for her idea lingered with her laptop open. She replayed the moment in her head. It was not the first time. Her record of ignored contributions grew over the year. She stayed late because silence in the room helped her build what she could not say during the day. Each hour had a collection of reports that matched her experience. None advanced far. The intake notes described feelings rather than patterns. They treated each complaint as a single event. No one linked them into a wider issue. The department measured resolution by the absence of further action. They never examined why that absence occurred. The company sent out an internal survey at the end of the quarter. Questions focused on workload and communication. Responses from women in mid-career roles carry a quiet edge. Many wrote about exhaustion they could not name directly. Some described a sense of fading from view. Others listed burned-out days with no clear cause. The results landed on a dashboard flagged yellow. No one scheduled a deeper review. Inside the same office, productivity reports showed stable numbers. Leadership saw order. They did not see the fractures below it. They did not hear the smaller voices fighting for room. They did not track the workers who stopped offering ideas because ideas went nowhere. At her desk, the analyst opened her notes again. She looked at the strategy she proposed. The same idea now moved through the system with another name attached. She marked the day in her log. She noted the time. She added a single line that carried more weight than the rest. This was the 5th time in 6 months. She logged off near sunset. The building grew quiet again. The stillness did not erase the tension that shaped her day. It only confirmed how much she had learned to work around. She walked to the elevator with her shoulders set and her questions heavy. The next morning would bring another meeting, another round of voices, another test of presence. The room had not seen her yet. She wondered how long that could last before something broke. Chapter 2. The pattern beyond one office. Industry data painted a clear picture long before this investigation began. One national report tracked interruption rates across mixed-gender meetings. The numbers showed a steady pattern. Women were cut off at double the rate of men. Another study mapped meeting participation. It found that contributions from women dropped sharply after the first interruption. The pattern repeated across finance, tech, healthcare, and public administration. The data confirmed what workers felt long before anyone measured it. 3 women from unrelated companies agreed to speak on background. None wanted their names attached. They feared career damage more than the discomfort of telling the truth. Their accounts were separate, but the cadence was the same. One described raising a point during a weekly strategy session and watching the conversation wash over her. Another spoke about being corrected on topics she specialized in, while junior staff received praise for surface observations. A third said she trained herself to shorten her thoughts because long explanations invited interruptions every time. Each woman carried her own version of the same weight. The reporting team brought these cases to a labor psychologist who studied workplace communication. He explained the cognitive load hidden inside these moans. When a worker anticipates being cut off, the brain shifts from problem-solving to self-protection. The worker spends attention monitoring tone, space, and timing. This drain makes it harder to think clearly. It makes it harder to speak with confidence. It turns every contribution into a mental battle. The psychologist called it an invisible tax. A mid-level manager from another sector described something he found during a recent audit of evaluation notes. He said he noticed a tone shift when writing about women on his team. He used softer language, he offered fewer concrete details, he wrote around their achievements rather than naming them directly. He said he did not notice this pattern until he compared months of evaluations side by side. He brought the issue to his supervisor. The response was brief acknowledgement and no follow-up action. He carried the realization with him and adjusted his own evaluations. Others did not change. Industry-wide surveys offered more clarity. Many workers reported that meetings felt like pressure zones. They described the need to fight for a foothold. They said interruptions shaped the room's hierarchy more than job titles did. They said invisibility grew faster when no one addressed the pattern. They also noted that the root cause was not always hostility. Often it was habit. People repeated what they learned in previous workplaces. Those habits hardened into culture. The investigation mapped these accounts against broader research. The alignment was tight. Women lost speaking time across sectors. They received less credit for ideas even when they led the work. Their performance reviews reflected a muted version of their actual output. None of this appeared in corporate dashboards because dashboards focused on outcomes rather than the atmosphere that shaped them. The question rose again. If the pattern stretched across companies and industries, was it cultural? Workers moved between jobs and carried expectations with them. Managers trained in one environment replicated the same systems in another. Leaders believed they were objective because numbers appeared stable. The numbers did not measure voices cut short or ideas dismissed. One source described her recent transition to a new company. She said she hoped the move would reset everything. It did not. She noticed the same dynamics during her first month. Her attempts to bring attention to the issue were met with polite agreement and no structural change. She said the silence around the problem was as heavy as the problem itself. Across all interviews, the pressure turned inward. Workers adjusted their behavior. They spoke less, they prepared more. They carried the same exhaustion seen in the survey from Chapter 1. They blamed themselves for not being louder. They blamed themselves for not being harder. None of them blamed the culture that shaped the room. They laid the cold poet, upset, the time, and the mist. The reporting team concluded its data review with a hard truth. The issue was not limited to a single office. It belonged to a wider landscape shaped by habit, hierarchy, and institutional drift. The pattern held even when companies believed they were progressive. The pattern held because no one challenged it at scale. The next step required looking at solutions, not assumptions. Workers wanted more than acknowledgement. They wanted evidence that someone was willing to change the system. They wanted measures that carried weight. They wanted a path that showed the pattern was not permanent. The investigation followed that trail into the next set of findings. Those findings revealed what happened when someone tried to break the cycle. The question grew sharper. If the system resisted correction, what cost fell on the workers forced to carry the burden? Chapter 3. The Fight to be Seen. A global HR consortium released a framework near the end of the year. It focused on bias detection, structured feedback, and accountability paths that did not depend on managerial discretion. The document outlined a three-step process. First, measure who speaks, who gets interrupted, and whose ideas advance. Second, require documented credit trails for major contributions. Third, embed review checkpoints into every workflow. The consortium's report stated that invisibility could be tracked the same way companies tracked compliance or safety. One company volunteered to test the framework. They kept their name out of public view. Inside their pilot program, meeting facilitators were required to log participation. Analysts had to mark where ideas originated. Managers had to assign credit in writing. 6 months of data showed a shift. Women gained consistent speaking time. Interruption rates dropped. Credit assignments became clearer. The changes appeared small on the surface. Workers inside the pilot described them as a release of pressure they had carried for years. In the office from Chapter 1, the environment had not changed. The analyst who watched her ideas pass under someone else's name reached a personal limit. On a quiet afternoon, she gathered her notes and her record of incidents. She understood the risks. She understood the slow pace of internal channels. She submitted her case to an external review body that specialized in workplace inequity. She did not frame it as accusation. She framed it as evidence of a pattern she could no longer carry alone. The submission process moved slower than she expected. The reviewers requested timelines, corroboration, and supporting documents. She provided what she had. She waited for the next step. During that time, nothing inside the company shifted. Meetings continued with the same cadence. Interruptions carried the same weight. Credit moved along the same familiar lines. She continued to work with precision, but she no longer stayed silent about the cost. Industry attention turned toward the consortium's framework. Some leaders viewed it as an administrative burden. Others viewed it as an overdue correction. The early data from the pilot drew interest. It proved that culture could shift when systems forced accountability. It also exposed how much resistance existed when companies relied on habit instead of structure. The pilot company released a summary with narrow metrics. It showed improved retention. It showed reduced burnout indicators. It showed higher satisfaction scores among workers who had previously felt muted. The document also noted a stubborn gap. Even with interventions, some workers still held back. Culture had moved, but not far enough to remove years of learned caution. For the analyst, the cost surfaced in moments she could no longer ignore. She felt the strain of staying aware in every meeting. She carried the weight of each lost idea. She knew visibility required more than skill. It required a room that let her exist without fighting for the floor. Her external case moved to its next stage. The outcome was not clear. She understood that clarity might take months. Across industries, workers in similar positions watched these expensive crack for use and crack for you. They wanted proof that invisibility was not a permanent feature of their jobs. They wanted systems that did not depend on luck or a supportive manager. They wanted a culture that recognized how much they carried in silence. The investigation ended on a hard line. Progress was possible. The evidence proved it. Yet the burden remained on the workers most affected to push for change. The cost of that burden was not measured in dashboards or surveys. It lived in the tension of every meeting and every day spent fighting to be heard. The final question carried weight. How long can a system avoid seeing its own people before the damage becomes irreversible?